living in Australia there now.
Yeah.
Excellent. Tamara, it's great to have you here. Please tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name's Tamara, although otherwise known as Kiki Petovovich or Shirley Sunflower, not often known as Tamara on stage anyway. I've been a street performer for a very long time, my whole adult life.
Wow.
And I haven't really had another job like many other street performers, I guess. And I was drawn to it because I absolutely love and adore people. And I love that idea of shared joy and connection. And I think that laughter is one of the most spectacular ways to provide that.
Oh, what a beautiful way to start the interview. Tamara, why begin this life?
What did you say, sorry?
Why begin this life? What made you go on this path? Yeah, well, not like because my parents had sex, but why begin the life of
because my mum pushed me out of her vagina.
Yeah.
You're not aware of those facts?
Well, I'll be honest, it was a shock to me, but I'm going to have to do some further reading now to understand what's going on. I meant more as an entertainer. I mean, it's a different life to what a lot of people lead. And it seems like a lot of people I talk to have quite distinct reasons when they're young in why they felt like they went into that path. And I was wondering if you did, and if you did, what were yours?
Yeah, I think I was always a massive people watcher. I just loved people, fascinated by them. I think if I hadn't have been a performer, I would have been some kind of, psychologist or something. I don't know. I'm always fascinated by people, and somewhere along the way, I just decided that I think, like a lot of maybe teenagers have, I had a brief moment of thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great to be an actor? But I quickly went past that, and I really fell in love with sort of these large characters, physical comedy. The more I sort of looked into what acting was, the more I fell in love with this stuff. But the real reason why I chose to do street theatre was because I didn't want to be an actor, like a waiter waiting to be an actor. I just wanted to, I'm an impatient person. I wanted to get the hell on with it and see if it was something I was good at. So, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. And were you watching films? Were you going to theatres as a young person? Was your family a kind of theatre going family?
No.
No.
Not at all. I was fascinated by movies, I think, from a young age. It's really fascinated by characters, like really fascinated by characters, and the way people transform themselves into something else. And when I finished school, I decided I was either going to go and be a journalist or I was going to go and be an actor. And I got accepted to a theatre school. So I did a communications degree in theatre and media. And while I was there, so lucky, like most of that course, one of the reasons I chose it was because it was all about physical theatre and character and actor-created work and self-devised pieces. And we did do traditional stuff as well. But I just loved this idea that I could have complete creative control over performing. I didn't have to be a pawn in a director's piece or whatever. I could actually totally imagine something and then put it out in the ether. You know what I mean?
You didn't just want to act, you wanted to have a creative vision.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, great. And how did that progress then? Were you like a duck to water?
I finished uni, and then when I finished uni, I felt like it was hilarious because I don't think anyone really thought I was that funny at uni. And I don't think I necessarily even knew I was funny. But my major work, I did a very sort of dark comedy, actually, with really full-on characters that I wrote and directed. It was a theatre show. And suddenly everyone's like, oh, my God, you're hilarious. And I was like, yeah, I thought I might have been, but I just didn't trust myself, So it was kind of a revelation to me as much as it was to everyone else. And I just don't think I'd ever been given permission to be hilarious. Like I was always loved to be silly and playful, but I was a female in the 70s, 80s, and 90s growing up, and I just don't think I'd been given that much permission to be bawdy and rude and ridiculous and crazy. And so it was a lovely revelation to me that was possible. But I felt like this jack of all trades, master of none. I didn't really know what to do or how to do things. And as all good stories go, I fell in love with a guy who suggested that I should go and study overseas. I don't know if he wanted to get rid of me or if
it's a really good idea. You go away for a few years.
If he was just giving me good advice. But I ended up going to physical theatre school in California, in Northern California. And that was the thing that changed my life. Absolutely.
Wow. Why? Why did it change your life?
Because it just completely broadened my mind about what was possible with character and with theatre and the physical body. And
this seems like quite an important part of your development. So let's delve a bit more. What was your mind state when you went there first? Were you nervous?
Yeah, I was shit scared. Yeah, it was the first time I'd left Australia, first time I'd been on an aeroplane. I flew all the way from Sydney to LA and then on to New York. And I went to New York to visit a guy who I'd met, a few times. Just went and stayed at his house in Hell's Kitchen and got a whole experience of New York. I wandered around New York like, that would have been 1995, I think. I wandered around New York like this, oh my God, like, and everyone was so kind to me. And, you think that you'd be taken advantage of when you look like that. And I remember it was so hot because it was August and I went to the movie theater to try and cool down. And I watched, what's it called? Austin Powers. And, and I was sitting in this movie theater between two massive black dudes. And they were laughing so much. And in the States, they talk to the screen, And these two guys go, and so I'm being moved like this because they're both laughing so much. And just the whole, I swear, I just had my mind, like, before I even went to school, my mind just exploded. I just fell immediately in love with travel. I fell immediately in love with other people and cultures. As I said, I always was so intrigued by people. And suddenly, God, there were all these really different kinds of people. And I went, I trained under a guy called Carlo Mazzoni Clementi. He was an Italian man who was heavily involved in Commedia dell'arte. And so we just learned a lot how to communicate physically with our body. We learned corporeal mime, we did tango, we did clown, we did melodrama. It was just a freaking feast of the senses. It was in this tiny little Californian town on the Redwoods in Northern California, and the only bar was called the Logger Bar, and it was full of loggers and international theatre students and clowns.
Wow.
It was just this beautiful mix of ridiculousness and everything.
Was it was a happy meshing? Those two groups seemed like there'd be conflict.
Yeah, no, they'd gotten used to it. I think the school had been there for probably about 20 years by then, and slowly growing. And so it was just this place where I was a place where magic happened, Matt. That's what it was, at least inside my head.
Yeah. And were you developing the idea of character then? Because you've done character work for most of your career, if I'm right to think. We very rarely see you go out and be kind of like, hi, I'm me, I'm doing something. You're always working within character. Yeah,
absolutely. I really, I did love it. I loved that clown notion. It was more probably clown that I loved, the idea of taking a certain part of you and just letting it just explode and just turn into a whole living thing on its own. And so I feel this incredible freedom inside those characters, I think, because I get to probably say and do things that maybe I wouldn't have the bravery to say and do.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing of the clown, isn't it? It gives you an invitation to challenge sacred cows through sacred tropes, through farce.
Yeah, exactly. And, and just to call stuff, as it is, because you can call it in this kind of, fun way. And it was when it was at the end of our clown, we did each sort of unit for 6 weeks. And at the end of our clown unit, our clown teacher, who actually is also an international street performer, Joe Diefenbacher, who was part of a foursome at that time, guy for American men, Los Payasos Vendidos, I think they were called, something like that. And now he's continued to work. He still works, as far as I know. I see him on the circuit from time to time in Europe.
Okay.
But he was a fabulous
I will be
teacher.
reaching out at some point.
Yeah, Joe Diefenbacher. He's very good. I can't think of his show. He has anyway. He
And
was a
so,
fabulous clown teacher, and he said to us at the
yeah,
end of the clown unit, we always put on, at the end of each unit, there was a show of all the best pieces over the time, because that was the great thing about theatre school. Every week we developed work, and fast. We just put out work constantly. It was so creative. It's just, and always with different people, or sometimes on your own, and in the format of each unit we were learning about. And at the end of clown, he came to me and another woman, Sharon. I remember her. She was this really skinny, sort of gaunt-looking lesbian. She's a wonderful, beautiful woman. And he came to both of us and he said, "I want you two to do your clown piece for the show." And we went, "Oh, awesome, thank you." And so, and then the night of the clown show, when we were all in the dressing rooms getting ready, he said, "So you two aren't allowed to do anything from your actual piece." We're like, "What?" And he's like, "No, I want both of you to just go out there and improvise." He said, "Just jump off." He used to have this thing that the clown lives on the edge of the precipice. And when the clown is really when the clown is really in the moment, it jumps off the precipice into the place of I don't know, being where magic happens. And I've just never forgotten those words. And so he sent us both onto this stage that night, and with nothing, we had nothing. And it was the most magical thing. It just really gave me confidence that I could do this thing, that this was a great path for me. And he said to me after that he just said, "I've never seen anyone like relate to an audience, read an audience, interact with an audience like you do." And that just became my thing, I guess. Like,
wow.
I never had huge physical skill in my shows. It was always just about that play with the audience and that interaction. And there it comes back to me loving people. So,
And do you put your where you are now down to that schooling? Do you think that was core in your development?
yeah, I think so. I think it gave me confidence to pursue that as work, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they also respected that sort of street theatre genre too. Like, they didn't look down their nose at it like they might have if you went to acting school or whatever. So they were and they really pushed that whole actor creator driven work, the work that you made by yourself from scratch or with other actors from scratch. And that was really
Which
special.
is a fairly unique thing in that, well, I say it's not unique, isn't the right word, but it's an uncommon thing in the world of actors, I assume. Most
Yeah.
actors are delivered a script and they deliver that script, and the creative stuff be all and ends with their formation of character.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. So
Very true.
what did you do after this then? Did you go and start doing shows in places?
I did, with two other people from school, actually.
Okay.
We went on the Canadian circuit the first time, did a few shows there.
Why did you go to the Canadian circuit? What was the... So you guys have gone to uni together, so I assume you're friends, right?
Yeah.
You finish uni, you all chat together, we got to do something. Is that kind of the
That's
evolution
what
of it?
happened. Yeah, and because of Joe and Los Payasos Mendidos, they Mendigos, I can't remember. Anyway, he had some contacts, so he helped us out as well to get some gigs in Canada. I was lucky enough to do the Edmonton Street Performing Festival then when Dick Finkel still did it. So that was one of my first ever street theatre festivals.
Wow.
And I was there with the Jim Show, Butterfly Man, the Flying Dutchman.
Wow.
There were just a bunch of, acts that, for a young aspiring street performer kind of blew my mind.
First of all, to start this off, what did you do?
What do I do when I'm there?
What did you do when you were there?
What did we do?
It's one of your first shows you've done, so it's I see there's some development going on.
Yeah. So that was already with Shirley Sunflower. She got developed at Physical Theatre School with that clowning course, actually, in the clowning part. And the essence of her, anyway. So I was the clown out of the trio. And we were called La Pamplemousse, and the others had these French accents. I did not. I don't know why, because I didn't want to have a French accent. I had a very shrill, Shirley Sunflower had a very shrill Australian accent. And and yeah, I was just the clown. I did lots of dumb stuff and they did the skills. Annie was a hula hooper. Paul had quite a lot of acrobatic and fight. He came from a fight choreography sort of background. And so I did bits and pieces with them, like, you know, I did a bit of acrobatics and a bit of whatever was going on in the thing, but mostly I was the clown. But I got, again, just by luck and wonder and all those things, to meet all those wonderful people at that time. And a lot of them were so encouraging to me about, you know, you should do a show on your own. You totally got this. I'm like, no, I don't have any skills. I can't work on my own. They're like, you don't need skills, you know. And I think Cherie Vickers was there that year as well. Do you know Cherie?
I think I know Cherie, but I'm not entirely. She's quite a powerful lady who does a comedy show. She's got brown hair to about here. Am I
yeah, and she used to do
this
thing with her tits catching on fire under a
yes
limbo.
I have met her many moons ago.
Yeah, and so she was there as well, and so of course I saw her work too, and not really like, you know, hers wasn't a high skill based show either. She was, and Kate the Great was there. Also English. Kate the Great is also English, I think. Or if I got that wrong.
I don't know if I know anyway, Kate the Great.
Well, she was her career was pretty much over as I started. And so not over, I mean, she was choosing for it to change. But she was also an example of somebody who didn't have, you know, it wasn't a skilled show. So that were really great things for me to see as well.
Yeah.
I was so blessed to have that.
Well, that was one of the questions that was going to follow, were the people welcoming and nice to you in these festivals? But it appears like they really were. It seems like there was a community that welcomed you in.
Some of them. There's always an asshole. But no, in general, people were really very lovely and very welcoming. And then, of course, they used to have that thing, Midnight Madness or whatever it was, the nighttime sort of variety show. And so everyone worked together in that situation as well. And I remember we did a very funny act with us women, a bunch of women. We got guys out of the audience, and we each had a guy who was our guy, and they had to put on pantyhose. And it was just, I don't even know why it was hysterical, but it was hysterical. We each had our own guy, and we had to barrack for him and make him do his thing. And I just remember having a lot of fun. Well,
sometimes with those things, it's about the impromptu nature of it. I think an audience maybe can tell that you're making it up as you go along and figuring things out. They're excited by that. I want to ask you about the formation of the character Shirley Sunflower before we move on more, because I didn't realise she was so early formed. She was formed in your schooling. What was the thoughts for forming her?
Well, originally, like as we developed clowns through that process, they had to be silent. So it was a very early incarnation of her, because she didn't shut up really. So and she was not yellow, she was blue, but the plaits, the harsh braids and the glasses were part of it, and this very dorky way, and this very sort of dorky combined with sexy way of interacting with the audience. And I think, to be honest, that was just who I was. I don't think it was easy for me to admit that I really was not part of the cool gang. I was a big dork, and I just loved this. I loved accessing that dorky side. But she was a very direct dork. You know, she didn't take shit. She was a dork, but she didn't take any shit, and was very, very innocently flirtatious. I think really she was. I think why I outgrew her eventually was because, in essence, she was quite immature and kind of, in some ways, fairly narrow in the breadth of her knowledge.
Is that maybe the product of a childlike mind creates a childlike character?
Totally. And she was like that, but also bossy, you know, like she was bossy, but yet completely childish. And it was her relationship, and that was her relationship with men, that sort of, you know, how do I, you know, I'm a dork, but you know you want me. But, you know, like it was this kind of very, I think about it, it's kind of ridiculous. She was, well, it wasn't, you know, you want me. It was like, I'm going to pretend that you want me regardless of whether or not you want me. That was kind of how she, you know, played with those.
Was there an element of a broader observation of social interaction, or was it immensely personal, or?
don't know for me that it was intentional, but I think there definitely was. I think women found it very empowering to watch the show because they thought that Shirley was, you know, having such control of these men. But for me, I was never controlling these men. I was asking these men to step outside of their normal man cool behavior and just have some fun and be open and play. And I think that that was something that, you know, men don't necessarily do that. I don't know if anyone necessarily does that, especially not in front of a few hundred strangers, you know.
Especially when you're not trained to do it. I mean, that's the thing. We're trained to do that now. We've spent years developing a reflex to do that. It's not a normal reflex.
No, it isn't. But it was such a joy to watch so many people just really let it go, just let it go and have fun, you know. And I would always sort of argue against people who'd sometimes say, oh, I love the way you make fun of those men. And I'd often go, I'm not making fun of them. I'm totally like inviting them to come and take the stage and be a hero with me, you know. I never felt like I was making fun of them.
No, you're playing with them. But I think I get this a lot. I mean, my material's probably a lot more overtly kind of jabby, you know. But I still always think I'm playing with people. In the end, when people watch this, they don't laugh because they believe this person is what I'm supposing they are at this moment. They laugh because I'm an idiot and I'm doing something silly and stupid, and people are playing with that idiot and they're watching the interaction with that idiot. So you've done your first show, your first group show in the Canada festivals. Did you travel with the troupe? You did a whole tour with the troupe doing that stuff?
Yeah, we did a couple of months. Which was also a massive eye-opener just to kind of have that experience. And yeah, we met more people. We went to a fringe as well. We went to Saskatoon fringe. And then I went via London and Amsterdam to home. But I'd already met a few street performers before I went to physical theatre school because I was so fascinated by it. Like I'd actually started going to Circular Quay and just checking out some stuff. And I got lucky enough in that summer, Leandra, the Spanish clown, was in Australia. I also met Paul Morocco, because I'd been in Adelaide before I went over to physical theatre school while I was in that stage of going, what the hell am I doing with my life? And I'd been in Adelaide attempting to do a street show when I knew nothing about it with two other women. It was a total fucking flop.
And this is before you went to America?
This is before. I forgot.
Oh, wow. So you really were from the get-go looking at the street, more so than most people.
Yeah. Interestingly, yes, because I do remember times when I had been given a bit of shit about the fact that I didn't grow up through the street, like I didn't start from nothing, that I
do your time.
Exactly. I seem to appear out of nowhere with this show, you know, but I didn't. I trained, I studied for ages, and I did have these floppy, horrible things happen actually. But you know, in that Adelaide, I met, as I said, Leandra and Paul Morocco. We saw the Doug Anthony All Stars there. I also met Bike Boy and AJ and a bunch of other street performers as well. And I was very intrigued by the whole thing, it would be fair to say.
Just before we go on to describe it more, just two things. Very, very quickly, it's getting incredibly hot here. So if I do go offline, it's because my poor laptop's overheated. Keep on track. I will be back on in a second. And the second thing is, do you think the reason that you were interested in it and the reason that there was an environment that drew you in was because of the expos that happened? Because you were going to, we're talking about the early 90s, are we? The late 80s, where you're going and doing the first shows before you go to America?
Yeah, that was the early to mid 90s, yeah.
And so you're just, so you're just after the expos. Am I right in thinking that? Because it was Expo 88, Expo, 88.
Yeah, was so I missed all of that. I was still at school. I didn't, none of that. I missed all
I heard
of
the
that.
story in Australia that there was from the Expo. The Expo was like the birth. And so there was this massive spread then.
That's what I heard as well. And yeah, and that's when it started to be a bit of a thing. I think
And
it
so by the
started
time
with
you went there, was it established?
Yeah, I guess it was. It's very compared to Europe, very hard work to work on the street in Australia. Probably even in Adelaide in those days, like, and the shows were very hard and very, there wasn't a lot, like on the street, there wasn't a lot of necessarily playful stuff, I wouldn't say. It was a hard environment.
And was that because the Australian people were cynical to street performance at that time?
I think there was just no history of it, and yeah, they didn't necessarily have a relationship with it yet, and probably had a bit more of and I don't mean this in an insulting way at all, but a bit more of that sort of what people might have seen it as that's what the dirty hippies do kind of thing, rather than, oh, this is an established, legitimate sort of, form of theatrical expression.
Low status outsiders. That's kind of what they saw.
That kind of thing. And I think that was
which
so that
some
was
of us are
really
low status outsiders, but not all of us.
Well, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think we probably all are, just wear a different cloak perhaps as we do it. I don't know, maybe. I think that we're obviously all people that buck against the status quo in one form or another, or we wouldn't be doing what we're doing, right? So,
yeah, very much so. And so when you came back from America, you said you went past London and Amsterdam. Did you stay when you went past those places?
Yeah, I was in both of those places for. I actually arrived in London the day Lady Diana died.
Wow.
I know, right? My first ever trip to London, and that's what I experienced. So,
a country in mourning for a lady they never met.
Yeah, exactly. But a lady they dearly loved. Depending on what you believe, obviously.
So I know the exact day. I remember the day you arrived because everything on television was just about. I kept switching the channel, going, "All right, come on."
Nothing. Yeah, I remember we flew from Amsterdam to London on British Airways, and as we landed, they said, "Oh, we've got terrible news," So I went to Amsterdam and stayed on a houseboat.
So I take it you didn't stay in London because of that thing, because everyone was die mad, and it just wasn't something that attracted you at the time. No. I really, in both of those places, I was visiting people I already knew. I wasn't in either of those places for street theatre, although I did go to the Liza Plain and see some shows. I did not go to Covent Garden at that point. Fair enough.
I wasn't in London for very long, and I was just on my way home, and I didn't want to go home, actually. So, so I went home, came home.
Just before you go home. Sorry to keep hanging up. I just like to drag as much detail as we can. When you went to Amsterdam and you went to the Liza Plain the first time, what was that like? What was the place like?
It was fascinating. I loved it. I thought the Dutch were a right treat. I did. They were amazing. Of course, I then lived there for a number of years, so we can talk about what I actually think about the Dutch afterwards.
Is that after? So you went back to Australia for a time and then moved there? Yeah. So let's focus on the first visit this time then.
Yeah. So Paul. Oh man, I'm so bad with names. Paul Van Vys, the Van Vys brothers, was performing, and I had met him in Adelaide as well. So I ran into someone I knew, so that was lovely. So, I sort of got to meet some of the other performers actually while I was on the Liza Plain, just having, one of their tiny little glasses of wine in a water glass. So yeah, that was fun seeing that. And just Amsterdam again, I was like a little sponge, my mind was just continually being blown. I wasn't that young, I guess. I was 23 years old, but I was pretty innocent.
23 years old is fairly young,
It is.
It doesn't seem it when you're 23, but when you're older.
But when you're 47, 23 is pretty young.
There you go. So were people just sitting around socialising on the pitch? I assume the little glasses of wine is people sat at the queue, they're drinking a wine, they're chatting, there's jokes.
Exactly. Yeah, it was
Was
really
the
nice.
queue and I know for us that this is a given, but you know, just because it's an archive and a record, was people sharing? Was there some kind of learning environment at the back of the pitch there that you saw?
I wouldn't have said so necessarily, but I could be wrong. Like, that was my impression. I mean, everyone was very kind to me, but
I mean, I
no,
don't mean it has to. It doesn't have to be. Come here, sit down tomorrow. I will teach you the
yeah.
ways. I don't. You know, for example,
No,
if you're sitting watching a show and somebody's kind of playfully mocking the show for its faults, that's a learning experience. It might not seem like it, but it is.
Oh God, I know that situation so perfectly. You just had so many things flash into my brain from my whole career from that little description. It's brilliant. Well, especially in Covent Garden, spending lots of time behind the pitch there is
in
really
the Portico.
Yes, in the piss.
Yes. And so, how long did you stay in Amsterdam for then?
Not long. I was there 3 or 4 days, maybe. And the same in London. I was just on my way home.
And so you arrived back in Australia then?
I did. And all I wanted in the world was to have my own street show. And I had no idea how to make that happen. So luckily, I was a fairly friendly, kind of fun young lady. And the street performing world is full of men. So I met lots and lots of performers and got to hang out with lots of people, and they were all very lovely and kind to me.
And so where did you go and stay when you went back to Australia? Did you go and settle in one place to develop the work?
My mum was in Kiama, which is where I live now. That's an hour and a half south of Sydney Airport. It's a little coastal town. So I went there first, but then I was going up to Sydney a lot. I was hanging out with JP quite a lot, talking about how I wanted to have a show. And he, of course, was in Sydney and was in charge.
I can't think of a better person to sit with. And,
no, exactly. It was it was good. But no, that wouldn't have been. That's wrong. I'm incorrect there. I'm wrong. That's not true.
Please correct yourself.
That didn't happen yet. I'm getting old. I had friends that I'd met in Canada come out, and we went to Tamworth to the Country Music Festival, and I tried to do a show. I tried to do a solo street show. It was
what was the Country Music Festival like? Was it lots of people? They're hanging around. It's like a market.
Lots of people. So, they have a closed street. There's not a lot of circle show stuff went on there. It's mostly music. And my friend was a dulcimer player, so he was busking, like going off with his thing. But I was trying to do street shows, and I was failing miserably, trying to do my own solo show.
Why do you think you were failing?
Because I didn't have it yet. I didn't get it. I didn't have this structure. I didn't know what I needed. And then the character, everyone was intrigued by the character, but you know what it is? It's that leap of faith, isn't it? It's just that I'm going to be confident and I've got this thing that I just didn't have yet. I just wasn't there. I didn't believe in my ability to draw a crowd was the thing. That's the thing, right? That's the hard part is to get people in while ostensibly doing nothing so that you can create a show. And I struggled with that. And then I went to Adelaide again with my friend who sent me to physical theatre school, my ex-boyfriend, and we did a show together. It was called The Bucket Brothers. And our finale was we did a headstand. I did a headstand on top of his head, but we both were wearing buckets.
Okay.
I thought that was a good idea.
And so you can't see either person's face during the finale?
No, I don't think so. That's my memory of it. I don't know.
The things you make up when you're beginning out.
I blocked it out. I don't know. But I did learn a lot in that Adelaide as well. I learned more. I was learning. And this is that thing, isn't it? Like that idea where you feel like people that idea when I was sort of told, oh, you came out of nowhere, you didn't do your time or whatever. I'm like, I fucking did do my time.
You
I
just didn't see
did it.
me.
Like, I was so insignificant that nobody noticed me, you know. So, but that's okay. And then the crux of it was eventually I just wanted to leave. I wanted to leave Australia. I wanted to go back overseas. And so I put myself into the Canadian fringe circuit again as a solo act, and just went, I just have to make this work, and got some great help. Tom Comet and the guy who I had been in my trio with the first time round.
Yeah.
And there was a few people helping me, really helped me to get something together right before, like days before Saskatoon.
And when you say they
started.
helped you, can you go through the mechanics of this a bit more? Because I'm not exactly sure how they helped you.
So I had ideas. So I was trying to get skill into my show. That was my thing, right? I felt that I needed to have skill in my show. Even though in the end that turned out to be completely not true. But that's what I felt I needed.
Maybe at the time you needed it. Maybe it was a stepping stone. Yeah, you need that thing. Yes, exactly.
And so it was the finale that I was struggling with, and I'd built this 5-foot table, you know, and I really wanted to do this back somersault off it, which freaking ridiculous idea, right? And out of that just came this, like, all of us just working on me practicing that, and everyone going, we don't think you should do this, and
so I take you in the garden, people are guiding you over in the flips and that kind of thing, and look at each other as they're doing it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, going, shit, it's a really bad idea. And
yeah, should we tell her? Are we responsible if she gets this wrong?
And then I had these ideas, like ideas for working with the audience and things I wanted to do, and like they just went, well, do that. And so thus was born this idea of me jumping off a table into the arms of 6, half-naked men being floated over to another man who was wearing a bucket of love. Don't ask me how, but that's what happened. And of course it just, grew and grew and grew, and the lines came thick and fast over time and everything. It was
but
definitely
we
a show
jump fast
on the street.
We jump fast. You take this show, you go to the Canada Fringe. Yes. Not the case in the Fringe circuit in Canada, Canada Fringe circuit.
Yeah.
You decide to do the play show in the end because you can't do the flips. Mm-hmm. What's the first show like?
I got blown out of the water by Tom Comet and his fucking 1,000,000-foot unicycle blowing a ball of fire out his ass, juggling a chainsaw. I hated that guy. I did not hate that guy. I've never hated that guy. I love you, Tom.
No, of course not. But was there a thing in the festivals where you had people trying to do more slight work, perhaps more creative work, were kind of, I'm going to use the word oppressed, but I don't mean it in an active, intentional way, but, it was kind of an oppressive force because their shows were designed to be so big and huge. They kind of pushed the artist guys slightly out.
Definitely. And, I was struggling with even the notion of could I do it, let alone could I do it while someone else was doing something like that next to me. Yeah. So the first show didn't finish. I got a certain way into it and then just went, okay, well, I can't do that.
I believe the in-industry term is you bailed.
I bailed. Yeah. And but then the next one happened, and the one after that happened, and the one after that happened. And by the end of the 10 days there, I firmly had a show. And then I went on to Edmonton and on to Victoria Fringe. And I won a People's Choice Award in Victoria Fringe.
Yeah,
my first few months of finally having my own solo show. So that was, it was just a nice thing. How
did you feel the show developed then? So over the course of, is it like 6 weeks, the circuit?
About that. Yeah.
So over the course of that, did you really feel the show coming together? Did you feel the sense of the, okay.
Definitely. And the more that things worked, the more I trusted myself, the more I played, the more I found the right lines and the right way to do it all. And the more I, and then of course I did that thing that I was just innately able to do. And that was choose great volunteers and have them work beautifully together and play well. And that was the key to it, really. That was definitely the key to it. That play, and because there was so much play, the show started to have a lot of depth and a lot of, of its own, a lot of lines. The script just developed and developed and developed.
And was there a lot of variance in between shows because you're playing with people who could do unexpected things, or did you master the way of controlling a volunteer so you got the same thing happening reliably in each show?
No, I think there was a lot of play. There was a lot of, I had points I had to hit, I had things that had to happen, but there was a lot of play in and around that. And of course, by the time I was in Victoria, my show was way too long and I actually needed to take things out because, when you first start, you need stuff. And then as it expands, it's like fun.
Have you found that over your career? This is because this is what I find, at least, is my show constantly ends up doing this, and then I have to go through a period of cutting bits out, and then it will do this again.
Yeah, totally. It's part of the joy, really, isn't it? That's why I always think when you do a new piece of work, you have to have all this empty space in it. You actually have to leave room for, and sometimes that's so painful because you go, fuck, don't know what to do here, or there's a big empty space here. And that's when you have to go to the precipice and jump off into the place of I don't know, right? And wait for the magic to happen, because it will. It absolutely will.
Yes. And the thing you said multiple times now, which I really like, is, and the more you say it, the more I listen to it and go, yes, I completely agree, is it's about trusting yourself. I know when I'm at my least best is when I'm trying to mechanically function. And I know I'm at my best when I intuitively understand what's happening.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's really, for me, it's one of the things I most dislike about watching performers sometimes when this happens is when they are not in the moment, when you can see them watching themselves. And I'm like, fuck, get in the moment. Get in the moment. You're in this beautiful moment where you are sharing, where these people are giving you their time and energy. At least have the decency to be there for them 100%. In that place, in that time, be completely present. And when you're completely present like that, like the shit in your brain, your genius, it comes. It just comes, right? If you're not present, it can't come because you're thinking about the past or the future, or you're worrying. It's only in that moment that your genius just fucking falls out of your mouth like gold, like it does.
Well, I can imagine if your brain's working out, right, I've got to present myself this way, and oh shit, the crowd's not as big as I'd like it to be, and oh shit, the wind's in the wrong way, the sun's in the wrong way. If you're thinking that, then that's got to be the opposite of giving your brain a good place to create.
Yeah.
I say that from personal experience because I do that all the fucking time, and it really bugs me. You shouldn't have to come to the point of having a good crowd to feel relaxed and happy performing.
No, that's right. It should be the opposite, actually. You being relaxed and happy on stage should turn every single audience, whether it be 5 people or 2,000 people, into a happy, joyous crowd. So, oh no, have you gone? You're all frozen. You're frozen with a beautiful smile on your face, though. Are you going to come back to me, Matt? I feel lonely out here on my own. Don't leave me out here on my own. Actually, I'm going to say something about what we were just talking about while you hopefully find your computer back on, is that I'm very fascinated by the brain. And one of the things that I find so interesting is that we spend, I think it's 95% of our time in our brain focused on the past, focused on things that have already happened. And we spend about 3% in the present, and we only spend 2% focusing on the future stuff. And I think that's quite relevant to being a performer. You don't want to be on stage and be thinking about the past. You really want to be right in that present moment, or thinking towards what can I achieve next? How can I do the next great thing, or the next in this moment, in this show? How do I push myself to an extra place? I think that our brains are so wired to protect us that it's totally normal that's why we watch ourselves. Oh, are they judging me? Do they like me? But actually, you need to leave all of that behind the rope, under the portico, wherever the hell you're leaving it, and in your suitcase. That's probably not a good place because you open that. You need to leave all of that somewhere else so that you can just go out and be really completely present. And I was happy to say that much without you, but now I feel like I don't want to be without you. Come back, Matt. Because I need you to ask me another question. Oh, I'm seeing there's a comment from Silva. Hey, Silva. I don't know if you're still watching. It's always a pleasure to have you around because you are such an awesome, lovely guy. Always very sweet and kind. I like that. Matt! I'm lonely without you. Guess it really must be hot in London. Lost your computer completely. Well, I might just sit here and drink a little bit of wine while I wait for you then, because I've been talking a lot. Yeah. It's really interesting, actually, Silva, that you've mentioned there about Tash. I loved watching Tash work, actually. As a woman starting out, it was great to watch Tash. I only ever got to watch her at Glastonbury usually, but loved her. And I'm thinking about, I almost forget that I ever did shows on the Lights Plane. They were hard shows. I learned a lot doing those shows. Tell you stories from the jam. Okay, I'm talking to Silva because he'd left a comment here, so I was like, I'll just talk to Silva. Maybe he's watching.
Yeah, no worries. Just so everyone knows, I've got a fan on my computer because we're in a heat wave right now. If the sound is horrible, please put in the message and I'll do something to adjust the sound. Sorry to interrupt, Tamara. Please carry on.
No, I just had a little diatribe about the brain after that. I was like, talking about the way the brain works because I didn't want to tell stories that you would miss out on. So I was being science, bit of science about the brain and being in the present moment instead of the past.
Well, anyway. Good on you for thinking on your feet there.
Everyone's probably asleep after that. They're like, God,
no,
I'm here to hear about street theatre, not the brain.
I did at the beginning of the quarantine, I did a little podcast thing, just one-off, where I went through all the science of COVID to deal with all the misinformation around. And all I got was boring. Oh, don't talk about actual things, No. So where are you up to now? We're up to, you've gone to Australia, you went back from Australia to Canada, right?
We were talking about being present, weren't we? And then, so I had gone back, and I'd gone back to Canada, done my shows. My shows had worked, yay. And then, so this was the other awesome thing, right? Suddenly I was leaving Canada and I had money.
Wow.
I was like, oh my God, money. I have money. So that was very exciting. And,
yeah. And so where did you go?
Well, I went back to Australia, but during that summer, I do leave things out because I don't want to be hugely personal about things, but this thing's quite important. During that summer in Canada, I did meet the Flying Dutchman again and spent a bit of time with Michiel. I spent time with Michiel and Jean-Michel. We went out to Gaspé, actually, to Jean-Michel's family home out there. I went on the back of his bike all the way out. It was fucking so cold by the time we got there. I couldn't even move, but I was determined. I was taking the whole trip on the back of the bike. And that's where I might be confusing my logic here, because I remember we played suck and blow with cards around the table.
Excuse me now?
Yeah, suck and blow with cards, when you pass it on.
Okay. I've never seen this game
at all.
No, it's not something for the quarantine generation.
You should
I've
suck
got
it
you.
up my mouth, but it's not possible, obviously.
Yes.
And that's so then I put this thing ended up in my show, right? That was one of the things that happened in my show. These guys had to pass this card between their mouths. It was
And what
just
a
one of,
wonderful game, because it
because
triggers
the
so
card
many
falls off.
discomforts.
It does. And then the card falls off and they kiss. That
Oh,
happens sometimes too.
I bet.
But it was such a great game. But that was developed, with those guys out there. And anyway, so Michiel and I, Michiel ended up coming out to Australia, and we ended up, I don't remember the exact the exact timing.
Chronology, yes.
But we, so we ended up as a couple. And so that was when I went for my first time to Christchurch World Buskers Festival.
To New Zealand,
and in New Zealand. That was the January after that Canadian summer, where I had, got a show and made some money. And I was like,
won
okay,
awards
this thing
as well. You
might,
won a People's Choice Award.
Yeah, that's right, I did. This thing might work, I thought. And then I went to Christchurch, and and it was clearly working. Everything was working. Everything was going great. And so then Michi was like, well, you should come to Europe and work the European circuit. They'll love you. I'll help you out. So I did my first season in Europe as well, and then like at festivals, at real festivals where they paid you money, paid you money for doing your job.
And so you hadn't been paid so far to do so. The Canadian
just been heading.
Okay,
no.
fair.
Yeah, everything was just heading. So suddenly it was a whole new world, and I was like, oh my God, this is my career, this is my job, this is my thing. And that was that really. That was
there a sense of identity with that? When you said this is me, this is my job, did you kind of take the identity of a street performer? And I don't know what the identity of a street performer is, but I have this feeling that if you say, right, this is me, there must be some, in a non-negative way, baggage that goes with that.
I think I took the identity of, I am now living the thing I wanted. I am entertaining people and making money from it. And on top of that, the thing I didn't necessarily know I wanted, I am traveling the world, and then living in Amsterdam, living in a completely different city, learning another language, dealing with another culture. And I was really, I think, I may not have thought it then, I may have thought it quietly, but now I go, I'm really proud of that girl that did that, that pursued this dream that she had and kicked ass. And I wish I could go back and tell my 23, 24-year-old self how proud of her I am, because I don't think she was proud enough of herself.
But I will say this. Some people say don't give yourself a hard time, and I say give yourself the worst time. You've got to be your own worst critic. Tear yourself to bits, because that's the only way you improve. So maybe if you would have gone back and told your younger self, you're doing great.
Yeah.
Maybe it would have ruined you. You don't know.
When you've got there, it's true.
Yeah.
Well, I think I now think about all the what I call the characters inside my head. I call them my league of extraordinary chickers. And I operate them like a lighting board. I know I've got Sergeant Major Sydney. She's the one who gets in and kicks my ass. And she's the one who makes me get up to go to my personal training sessions. She's the one who, does whatever it is that she does. She rules with a hard hand. But then I have my big Latina mama, who just nuzzles me into her bosom and says, shh, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. So all of these...
It's a psychological hack, kind of, you've got here, where I need this feeling.
That's right, because you can't always just be wrapped in the bosom of Latina mama. You'd get freaking nothing done, would you? You just, that's just someone taking care of you all the time. That's right. So what are all the other characters doing, and which one do I need to have dial it up right now to actually, get what I want out of life? And then when it's going too hard, you need someone to, to give you a little pat on the back or whatever.
You need Latina mama. Bring you into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you're in Europe now. Do you settle in Europe? You said that this is me. This is. It seems like you're comfortable there. Is that where you spend a lot of time now?
That was where I spent a lot of time for a long time. Yeah. Probably from the time I was about 24 until till my mid 30s, really. Yeah, so a decade.
Yeah.
I was there.
And
I
what was
was
that?
in.
And what was that like then? Give us give us some stories or some experiences from those times, because that's a good chunk of your life.
Yeah, it was. It was just such a pleasure. Certainly at first, it was such an incredible pleasure to meet lots of people, um, and sometimes because I was such a people pleaser and I always just wanted to be liked. So sometimes having a really successful show wasn't always great for that. I
Why
sometimes,
do you mean that?
because sometimes I felt like, when I went to certain things that I'm thinking of one particular event where I had, and it was a long running event, 3 weeks, where I
Is it
had to,
still running to this day?
yes, where I
Okay,
had
sorry.
a
Yeah.
huge amount of success there, and I did feel a little bit like, people were a bit, she's the pet and everyone loves her and all that, and I hated that because it's that horrible thing of, and now I probably that I would feel very differently about those kind of things now, but then I was still very young and very um, insecure and shy, and I didn't really know how to handle this thing that was happening. Like,
Is it possibly
like,
as well that because you're young, you don't realise that a lot of that is fed by illogical jealousy, and it's
yeah,
fed by other emotions that aren't necessarily the ones that are on the level, you know?
yes, and like now as a full blown grown up who takes responsibility for her feelings and emotions in every single moment, well, tries to, it's very easy to justify all of that, but at that point I don't, and there was still, like, I had suffered from anxiety so much of my life, and so traveling around on my own as a solo female, even going to gigs where you were well taken care of and your hotel and everything was there, but you were in foreign countries where you didn't speak the language. It was quite isolating, and sometimes I felt incredibly lonely, and really challenged in dealing with my own anxieties. And so
Did you
again,
ever
I
find
go,
yourself having issues socializing? Did you
oh,
ever?
all the time, especially because of the language gap. I always felt like you're sitting around a table with a bunch of German or French or Spanish people. They're not going to speak English just because you're there. So you've kind of you can't interact like you would ordinarily. And I didn't grow up in a country where I got to learn to speak several languages from day dot. Um, so I did find that isolating. And again, that was, I think I carried a lot of my own feelings of guilt or inferiority for not being able to speak those languages or not being able to engage with people. And also, I was always incredibly shy. I was so shy, which again is, so many people think that's so weird when you do what you do for a living. But there's a lot of very shy performers, I think. I
Yeah,
was
I mean,
frightfully shy still.
I did listen to an interview with you a couple of days ago, prepping up for this interview. And I'm pretty sure it was you that said this, that you felt more comfortable on the stage than you did in real life. And I really
Yeah.
empathized with that, really did.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's still, that's only just not true in the last probably few years of my life. Like, really, probably since my mum passed away, when I've really worked really hard at finding out who I actually am, and and being okay with who I am. And so I think, yeah, there's a lot of hiding in, and a lot of satisfaction in having
Well,
this kind of beautiful people to hide behind, these gorgeous, gregarious, fabulous characters who made people laugh and laugh and laugh, and then you're just this person who goes, oh, I don't know what to fucking say to anyone.
and that's the thing, that's the imposter syndrome, maybe, is that
Yeah.
they're doing the same thing, but maybe just their stage extends a little bit further than yours does. they're on stage at the dinner table, whereas you're not on stage at the dinner table. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
And so when you're in Europe, you spend 6 years there, but you don't spend forever there. You do move on to stuff. Why?
Well, I never spent a full year in the Northern Hemisphere anyway. I always came home to Australia for every summer. Because I hate winter, for starters. and secondly, because
you don't like our European winters?
No, not at all. Not one little bit. And then because I obviously my mum was here, you know, and I have, as much as I loved being away from Australia, there's something very beautiful about Australia. It's a beautiful place to be. So yeah, I did that. But after I split up with Michiel, I went home for a while, and then when I came back, I was in London. So that's when I started being in London quite a lot.
And so, as a London-born person, as a London-born person, I'm really interested in this bit. Not that I'm not interested in everything else, but particularly this bit. I'd like a lot of detail for it. So, when you arrived to London, what's your experiences like when you first arrived there?
I was fascinated by how creative Covent Garden was, by how many people were there.
And at what era are we here now? Because this will be a contention point we talk about later in terms of creativity.
Yeah, this would be probably 2003-ish.
Okay.
4 maybe 2003, 4. Okay. Yeah, around then.
And so you were amazed at the creativity there.
I was amazed at, you know, the fact that there was, there's that very British sense of humor as well. I think that shines through things. It gives things sort of character where maybe there isn't even necessarily a lot of character, but to me it feels like character because it's this beautiful bumbling Englishman, you know.
It's not character formed, it's just innate. It's what we do.
It's what you do, exactly. And I knew I'd known microphone already. And we were, so it was great to see him, of course. And I arrived there with Gavin, actually, with Leopard Man, or he came not long after me. We had been to some other countries in Europe together.
The original Pole Show, so I'm told.
Yes, exactly, the original Pole Show, Gav. And so I had such a lovely time in that sort of 2 years, that the first 2 years that I was based there. I was still going to Europe a lot for work, but I did shows in Covent, not millions, but I did them.
What was the atmosphere of the place like when you went there? So was there a morning draw at this point? Is the 12 o'clock at midnight? There's a morning draw, so it's 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock?
8 o'clock, I think it was. Yeah.
And when you arrive, so for people who don't know, almost everyone knows by now, but a draw, performers turn up in the morning, they put their names in a hat, and that's how they decide who works that day and when they work. So how many people are at the draw then?
Oh, there were a lot. I seem to remember it being quite a lot, like in the
you look
20s maybe?
30s, yeah.
In the 20s, probably most of the time.
Was there a big variation in the shows?
In the type of show, you mean?
Yeah, the type of show, type of delivery, the character.
There was a reasonable variation, I think. But I mean, having come in the summer, I guess there were traveling people around as well. Yeah, you know what I loved? I loved that you could sit in the Cove Bar and watch shows from up there. I loved that. I loved that era.
Oh, the Cove Bar's gone now.
Yes, I know.
It's a restaurant, unfortunately. We've still got the Punch and Judy sitting above.
Yes. So I loved that. I loved that there was a bit of there were people there that I felt quite an affinity, like a family with, for a little bit of time that I was there, which I really enjoyed.
And would that express itself through going for drinks after work, hanging out, going for breakfast,
hanging out,
the kind of social stuff you do during the day?
Yeah, and then of course, you know, doing things like going to, I'd been to Glastonbury before that. I'd been to Glastonbury a couple of times when Michiel and I were together as well. But just, going to Glastonbury was wonderful, and meeting so many, hanging out with so many people that from all kinds of different walks of life as well. That was really wonderful. But yeah, I just really loved my time in London. I fell in love with London for a while. And then, Dave and I ended up buying an apartment there. So we,
So you and Dave met in London. You didn't meet and then buy an apartment together. You met in London.
We met in London. We met in London. I just thought, the romance of it was that I had an on and off relationship with Richard Garrity, and the whole time I got to, Dave was always around there, and we became quite good friends. We were always hanging out together, enjoyed each other's company, and then he told me that he had met me many years ago when I was at Glastonbury with Michiel. Not that many; it was a few years before that. And he said, "Oh, but you wouldn't
seemed
remember."
Like many at the time.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that I think that Dave he admitted that he had a secret little crush since he first saw Shirley Sunflower. He was like, "Oh wow, I like that woman." But yeah, we didn't end up being together for quite some time after we first met, and then and then all of those, and then I was so
sprouts.
Yes, that it did, and I was very lucky and privileged to have found that love with someone else who did what I did, I guess, because it meant that I was able to have a stable life while still having my street performing life, and I was able to have children while still having my street performing life. And we toured as a family. Both kids left Australia 6 weeks old to go on tour. I went back
to tour after 6 weeks of...
I did, with both kids.
Are they twins then?
No.
So both times it was push them out and get back on tour.
I did. Yeah, they were 4 years apart, and there's a good reason for that. But so I feel very, I do feel very lucky about that, because I think that's sometimes a difficult thing for women in our business, is how to, like, once they, if they want to have children, like, how do they sustain their career when they have children, depending on who their partner is? If they've got a partner who's an accountant or something, how do you do that? And so I feel very lucky and privileged that I was able to have both those things in my life, my career and my children.
Just since we're on the point of being a lady and street performing, it doesn't appear to me like you felt like there was an incredible challenge upon you as a lady street performing, even though you might have felt more at threat than other people. But there's something that I felt doing the interviews and chat with people, is that there's something that ladies have that guys don't have, is that when you walk on a stage or a pitch, as me forming a character, I think about the qualities of the character first. So I'll think about, what does he do, where does he do, what does he think, how does he feel, and gender will come really far down the line in the formation of my character. But it feels like with ladies, you don't have, the option isn't there for you to do that. It seems like you have to address your gender first. The first element is that. It appears to me, at least. And please tell me I'm wrong by all means.
I don't think you're wrong. I think, again, it's a choice, and I think that I think somehow innately I refuse to acknowledge it. I don't know. I certainly, don't get me wrong, I certainly used my gender to my advantage.
Yeah, but it also seems like you're playing with that, and you're playing with the how do I put this best?
With the relationship, with the
stereotypical relationships as well.
Yeah,
you're playing
with the reality. And with what the status quo says, and how that may not be true. I think there was a very irreverent kind of feeling about what a woman was. I very much played a woman, and I will be totally fair and frank in saying that I certainly did not use sexuality, but I used it in a very dorky, framework, which I think allowed the sexuality to exist quite easily as well.
But it seems like, even just thinking about it now, it allows that sexuality to exist without it becoming gaudy, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. And because it was also quite stupid and naive in its own way as well. But no, I really didn't ever want it. And I don't feel like it ever was a thing for me. You know what? The only time it was a thing for me, the only time it pissed me off was when people would go, you're an amazing female street performer, or oh, you're the best female street performer I've ever met. I'm like, why the fuck do I need the gender? Why does the gender word need to be in there? Why can't it just be you're an amazing street performer, or you're one of the best street performers I've ever met, or whatever? Why did it have to be? Why was my achievement classified by my gender? That pissed me off.
Yeah,
that's my
especially rant. Since we're not 100-meter sprinters where you could start to try and justify that in some way, you know.
Yeah, exactly. My hormones or my bits and pieces did not maketh me good or bad at my job. Yes. Do you know what I mean?
You said something in an interview before that I was interested in, and I suspected you might not stand by this now because the environment has changed. But you said, well, you're a lady. Come on, ladies, be ladies. You don't have to be a boy. In the interview, talking about female character formation. And I kind of get what you're saying there, but I'm just interested now, and this is probably 10 years on from that interview I listened to, how you feel about it at this point.
Gender is a very different thing now, isn't it? Like across the board, right? We have all these letters that we need to acknowledge, and we even have a new pronoun, you know. So I feel like as an old lady, let me take that back. Rewind. As a 47-year-old woman, I feel that very unqualified to talk about gender now. Gender is now so, to use the Dutch word, ingewikkeld, so complicated. It's so, it's like a minefield for those of us that are still trying to navigate the changes that we have to be aware of or respectful of. And so that is where my perspective has changed in my attempt to keep my mind broad and not alienate anyone in having that conversation. But I would probably still stand by the fact that if you're presenting as a woman, a she, a her, and then I would say that being the female that you are, whether, you know, then I think that, okay, sorry, let me, I'm going to be very careful here, but try to be honest. I think when I made that comment, my point was be open and vulnerable to the fact that you're a woman. Don't try to do it like men do it. I think that was my feeling.
Essentially, you're saying don't be afraid to be yourself.
Exactly. And I think that's exactly where my outcome of this little brain fart that I'm trying to have right now was that I think in the end of the day, it was my unsophisticated way of saying, just show up as you. Like, you know, you don't try and do it in a masculine way if you're not masculine. Don't, like, just be true, just be authentic, an overused word these days, but just be authentic, because that comes back to the whole, you know, being able to be present, being able to be truly yourself, being able to be in those moments, and therefore give the most joy and the most of yourself to your audience, right? Yes. And that's, I mean, that is probably my other huge thing is what we do is service. It's not ego, it's service, right? Your job out there is to serve your public. It is to give them joy. I'll go this one with you if you want. Yeah. I honestly think that serve first. Like, of course it's your art, but so and for an accountant is their art too, right? Or for a but for a table maker, a table is their art. Making woodwork is their art. But if that woodwork can't stand up to the weight of a plate, then what is its value, right? It's service. There has to be an essence of service, I think. I really believe that. I think that it's your art is an expression of you, absolutely. Your art is an expression of what you see, how you see the world, and
It's
how
also
you
the way you influence the world.
Yes, and how you, but that's a service, right?
I suppose,
Maybe not to everyone, but to those that want to hear your message, to those that are actually niched into your way of thinking, it is a service to them, right? They're going to walk away going, wow, I learned something, or I'm transformed. Like, my favorite thing was the transformation of people, that idea of suddenly I'm really happy, or I haven't laughed that much in ages, or, you know, I feel like I was part of something, or whatever it might be. My only disappointment with that was always that in our world we can only do that so temporarily, you know. Like, I'm like, I wish I could follow those people around and keep making them laugh. Obviously I can't, because I would be freaking exhausted, but like,
it'd probably be a bit weird as well after a couple of hours.
Probably be a little bit, they'd get over that. I think that I really, well, I don't know, I love to think about it as service, and I always have, I think, for a long time. Maybe that's the nature. It
certainly seems healthy. It seems a healthy way to sit yourself in, because you're never going to come to a point of going, oh, it's a fucking shit crowd. If you see yourself as serving them instead of them serving you, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, how are they serving you? They're not serving you.
They're the fruit that I pick from the trees. If I need to earn a living, I go out to the forest and I pick the fruit from the trees.
But they're drawn to you because of what you have to offer them, what you're serving to them. You know, what your gift is. It's your gift.
Yeah. Fascinating. There's another point I want to talk about that's similar to this, which is another thing that we had a conversation about when I was only learning many, many moons ago, about performers having other influences. But I'd like to come back to that a little bit later. Let's get back onto your story again now. So you're in London. You and Dave have just got a flat together. You're working Covent Garden. Life seems to be going pretty well.
It was until we bought the flat. Then we were flat broke. That's what. But yeah, life was going pretty well. Yeah, it was good. And we came out to Australia and we got married. And actually, there's a hilarious story in this. Funny story. Dave had, with respect to Dave, and he wouldn't disagree with this, but he had been wanting for quite some time for us to be a proper couple. And I was very reticent for ages, just like, I don't know. I was recovering a bit from a broken heart, if I was honest. So I was very slow to want to have another relationship. And
you were like the fox and the saucer of milk.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's a good way to think about it. And but of course, this whole time, as we spent a lot of time together, we became really, really great friends. Like, we got along so well, and I really loved his company. But I was in I love this story because I was in Amsterdam with Lee Hayes and Dirty Fred, sitting in Lee's partner Mariella's garden. Beautiful summer day in Amsterdam. And we were just sitting there drinking some beers, back when I still drank beer, and just having a nice time. And they were talking about their ladies, you know, about their wives, their lovers, their loves. And they were so, these two, you know, like dudes, you know, these two male street performers having this gorgeous conversation about these women that they loved. And I just, in that moment, I went, oh my God, I'm such a twat. And I just picked up my phone and rang Dave and said, okay, I'll be your girlfriend then. And he was like, really? I was like, yeah. And he's like, okay. So to Dirty Fred and Lee Hayes, thank you.
There you go.
Who would have thought?
Well, it's amazing how it took you that moment of seeing other people's love to see your own, which is quite a nice thing. You know?
That's exactly
the external, the ability to see the back of your own head for a brief moment. So did you guys move to Australia to live there? You and Dave. You went there and got married.
We came here and got married, but then we went back to London. That's when we were flat broke after all of that. Yeah, it was an interesting phase. Things had to change quite a lot. We certainly didn't hang out at the Cove as much, to tell you that, spending a shitload of money on things. Yeah, exactly. And and
did you end up working more? Did you end up trying to? We've got to pay this thing, and so the workload goes up.
A little bit with street shows, but I just worked hard at trying to get myself a really good long European summer of work. I did.
Did it affect the work? Did it affect the performances because of the economic pressure?
That's an interesting question. I think it does. I think, well, if you let it, I think it's one of those things, isn't it? Suddenly you're not serving, are you? Suddenly you're freaking out. Suddenly you're like, oh my God, if I don't make this much money, I'm in trouble. So,
well, it's one of my arguments, which I'll come to later with you. I've got a discussion I'd like to have with you towards the end of the interview. I think it's going to be really interesting. But just a tag to coming up to there, I have this feeling that economic environments affect the performers a lot because it gives them either freedom or the lack of.
Yeah, and I think that probably is very true because we're so emotionally attached to what we do. And so if we let that get in the way, well, it's another thing that takes you out of the present moment, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's just one more thing that you have to drag out of your mind is the panic and worry of money. And if you look at an audience thinking, please God, don't go because I need to eat, that's not what people want to be served with. They don't want to empathise with you in that moment.
And they smell fear. Those fuckers smell fear,
Well, this is interesting. I have this feeling that, you said be true and be in your moment. I think that thing of them smelling fear is that they're an intuitive organism. They're constantly empathizing with you. And they pick up the slightest little bit of suffering that you play. And even if you hide it as good as you can, I think it's a rare human being that can genuinely be under the hammer and still not reference it, not have it play out in their emotions in some minute way.
Absolutely. Excuse me, I just have a child lurking here. What do you need?
It's okay, no worries.
You what, sorry? Oh, come quickly, say goodnight. This is my beautiful daughter who's coming to say goodnight to me. She's about 6'2". She's 6'1".
What a giant. It takes after Dave in terms of height then.
She is very, very tall, and I'm quite happy about it because it means she's taller than all the boys, so they're not interested in her. Isn't that wonderful?
Oh,
it's a wonderful feeling for a mother.
Yeah, you must sleep easy.
I love you. Love you too. Good night, sweetie.
Yes. You've moved back to Britain. You're flat broke. You're trying to arrange European tours.
Yes. And and we just really got on with it then. We just got on with it, got it sorted. Once I was back doing European gigs, well, things were fine. A little bit of struggle there. I remember often the cycle from Battersea into Covent Garden and back again. We did a lot of that. And but it, that part was fine. What got interesting was then, of course, that must have been the August or September of that year. I found out I was pregnant with her.
2004, 2005.
That was 2005 was the year we got married. That was the year I got pregnant. Yeah, later that year, 2005, and so that so just as we were recovering from being broke, then due to my pregnancy, there was a lot of it that I couldn't work during it. So that was one of the reasons I was.
You weren't jumping off a 5-foot stage onto people while pregnant. Shocking.
I was, but I remember being in Floriade actually, and the Pitts were there. I was there with the Pitt family circus, and I was doing several shows a day in Canberra, and I was so unwell. This would have been in the October, and so I was probably still less than 3 months pregnant. And I was jumping off the table and jumping slightly onto my side as opposed to straight onto my stomach. But I was so unwell that during one show I went, "Excuse me," and just walked behind the tree and threw up to work. So disgusting. But yeah, so I did
I
work
bet
until
everybody in the crowd turned around and went, well, she obviously likes to drink.
They probably did too. Oh no, I can't believe you just said that. But they probably did. I didn't even think that. Yeah, so then, you know, life changed. Life changed dramatically then, and then suddenly we were in the following year's tour. And so in that time, actually, we did. David got his residency here in Australia before Scout was born, or just after Scout was born, actually. And we ended up buying. We rented out our flat in London, and we bought a little house here in Kiama. And so we were sort of going. My mum moved into that house, and we were going back and forwards between the two.
And what was it like touring with your family?
It was fine. The funniest thing was that the first gig I did was 7 weeks after Scout was born. She was born by cesarean as well, by the way, because I had placenta previa. But anyway, I'm so stupid. I didn't.
You went
even
back to
think
work
about it.
6 weeks after a cesarean.
7, yeah, it was 7 weeks. But
7
yes.
weeks. You went back to work 7 weeks after having your stomach cut open and a child pulled out of it.
I did. And when Zevi was born, I went back to work 5.5 weeks after he was born by cesarean.
And I assume, because once you have it, you've got to keep
I had to have it again, when he was a big baby as well. So they wouldn't let me do it any other way. But but I was in Berlin and I was doing my first show, and Dave was like hovering really close. He was a bit worried. Well, I'll be fine. Anyway,
have you got your stitches out at this point, right?
Yeah. All of that's gone. But I go to do my handstand on top of these two guys, right? I'm there, bum in the air, legs, arms ready to go. Nothing. Because I didn't even I had no idea that my stomach muscles weren't going to work like they used to. So I literally went and I just couldn't do it. And I burst out laughing because it became apparent to me what was actually happening. And that was that I had no freaking stomach muscles. There was no way I was going to do a handstand in any position, let alone on top of two men.
And did you let the audience see behind the curtain?
I said, I went, yeah, that's not going to happen. Trick number 2, because I usually do 2 tricks.
Moving swiftly on.
Trick number 2. Had I have been with an English, an actual English speaking audience, I may have probably been more transparent, but it wasn't really worth going into a full description of things with the Germans. So
yeah.
But yeah, that was very funny. So then I had to spend the next week doing a shit ton of sit-ups so that I could do shows the following weekend. And as a consequence of doing that, because I also didn't know, I can still stick 2 fingers in between my abdominal muscles because they never pulled back together properly because I didn't do it right. So so I'm sure that's.
So when you show off your 6-pack, they're separated at the side.
It's nice separation down the middle. That's right.
Yeah.
So you notice how I didn't even doubt that I have a 6-pack, right?
There you go. Of course not. You're professional. Was it a similar experience with the second one then? Was it a similar kind of thing? Obviously, you're more prepared. You understand what's happening. But was it much of the same or?
Yeah. I immediately I knew I had a show 5.5 weeks after Zeb was born. So I immediately went to Pilates and started trying to, do things properly. The benefit of hindsight, obviously. But it was different. Traveling with the 2 kids was kind of more full on. Scout was, oh my God, the children were amazing. They were just both amazing. Like I can remember Scout used to sleep in her pram all the time. I remember one night parking her next to a huge speaker stack in this room where we were having a party after work. And, she just slept, sound asleep the whole time. Both the kids were incredible. And it wasn't always easy.
Please carry on.
No, I was just going to say it really wasn't always easy, but you kind of blank out all of that stuff after time and how tired you were.
do you think the kids benefited from having such a rich social environment around them?
Oh God, yeah, I do. They're amazing humans, my children. I know everyone says that about their children, but my children are amazing humans. They are so kind and empathetic and intelligent, and they worldly, and they ask great questions, and they're just really and we've always completely included them in what goes on and with our life, and they love it. And they're really well socialized, I think, from hanging out with street performers a lot. And Dave made a suggestion to me when Scout was born, and he said, I don't think we should stop swearing because we have a child. And I went, oh God, that's risky. What are we going to do with the child? And anyway, so I said, fine. So some time passes and suddenly Scout can speak. And one day I hear her walking around the house going, ack's sake. And, she'd run into something or drop something. She'd go, ack's sake. And I'd be like, oh no, that's me. That's what I say. That she's saying for fuck's sake. I know she is. And that's what I always say. So I was incredibly embarrassed by this. And was like, oh God, we've done the wrong thing. And then my mum had her, and my mum came back and told me that my daughter had a potty mouth. And I was like, oh, goodness me. And so then we started playing this, I know you've frozen there, Matt. I'm going to tell a story anyways while you get back to me. Then we started playing this game with her called the insult game, where she was able to come up with insults other than swearing words. So it'd be things like, you're the cheese between daddy's toes, or you're the poop hanging off a sheep's bum, or whatever we might say. Trying to teach her to be creative with her insults, basically. And so my mum had her again one day, and we went, how'd she go? Did she swear? And my mum was like, no, she didn't swear. I'm like, yes, we've succeeded. And my mum said, but she did call me a cranky old fish face. And I was just like, so I was worried that continuing to swear around the kids was a bad thing, but Scout swears now as a teenager, but Sevi never swears. The kids just haven't sworn. They're totally fine with it. But it wasn't just about what we were going to say. They were surrounded by other artists all the time, and we wanted them to be, and we wanted to have those gorgeous, interesting conversations with these crazy, wonderful people that most kids don't get to have long interactions with. And so I think that street performers and street performing and all that traveling they did as small children has absolutely only enriched their lives, and I'm incredibly grateful for it, and for every single person who was kind and took time to chat with my kids, and for all the shows they got to watch and everything. So it was very cool. I do remember another just child story while I'm waiting for Matt. Was in Hanover one year. Matt and Dave were doing Married Men, and I was doing Shelley Sunflower on the same stage, and Zevi was only 3 months old, and my mum was there as well. So she was having Scout, but I had to have Zevi because I was breastfeeding him. And we would I would go and do my show, and Dave would have the baby. I would come off stage, and Dave would throw me the baby, and he would go on and do a show, and we just did this all night long for 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, we just played hand off the baby, and I would do a show, then come off, breastfeed, go back on, do a show. But I don't regret any of that either. It was such, as I said before, it's a total treat to get to have both those things. I know I talked without you this time.
Yeah,
I just kept going. I told stories about my children.
Oh.
I'm not sure that's exactly what everyone wants in their street performing archives, but anyway.
Hey, it's your life, so it's reality. Exactly that. Did you slowly gear down touring as the kids got older then?
We did eventually, yes. So we did after Scout. Actually, when I was in the hospital having Scout, we were contacted by the GOP variety theatres in Germany, and so. After her birth, we did the summer season and went straight into 8 We did 8 months over 2 years in the winters with them in Germany. So that was quite a good gig while we had a small person in our life. And then we took Scout out of school for years. She was out of school for 3 or 4 or 5 months of the year.
Were you homeschooling?
Nah, a little bit. She was getting the education of life. Nah, screw school. It's overrated. And I think she, and as her teacher said, she learns way more by, doing what she does with us. So, and of course we had Dave's parents were in the UK, so she got to hang out with her other grandparents and stuff. But what was I going to say? What did you ask me? You asked me something specific. Slow down touring. Yeah. And so once Zev was at school as well, once they were both at school, I think the first 2 years of him being at school, we took him out. And then after that, we decided we needed to really be more settled in Australia, spend more time. So we went from sort of being away from Australia 9 months of the year when we first made the decision to move here, down to more recent years. Sometimes it's only been 6 weeks that we would go on tour to Europe.
And so did you start retooling your life in? Sorry, I'm moving around trying to keep the laptop on instead of turning off from this bloody heat wave. Did you set up more of a life in Australia then? As you began touring less and less, it would seem natural that your life would slowly move more and more to being Aussie-centric.
Yeah, it did. And that's when we developed Laughter House, our company, and Dave wanted to build the little tents. And so we supported that. And
do you want to talk about Laughter House? Forming it, why you formed it, how you formed it?
Laughter House. I say it
again. Laughter House.
I like the way you said it.
Laughter House.
Laughter House. That's what funny. Corey Pickett always makes the joke that Laughter House is his version of what he's, the way he's going to start his own company and call it
the German art house version.
Yeah, exactly. So it was Dave really wanted. He loves building, so he really wanted to sort of make these little tents and I was on board with the idea, especially from the perspective of what we wanted it to be, which is the opportunity to give people the very best of the street show in a very controlled environment. So the shortest version in a really controlled environment with great atmosphere. So that the service, the experience, the audience experience was increased dramatically. That was my sort of feeling. And particularly in Australia, because unlike Europe, I think sometimes people's understanding of what was necessary to make a street show work well in terms of the logistical setup was often far from ideal. So you often found yourself put in these ludicrous scenarios at gigs where you went, well, how the hell am I supposed to make this succeed? And of course you do your absolute best, but you knew that if the stage was just facing that way and the people were able to come beyond the barricade or this or that or the other was able to happen. But anyway, so we wanted to sort of circumnavigate all those problems by really be able to control the environment in which we performed. And the other reason that we did it was we wanted to be able to give other artists work as well. So we would have our venues and rent them out fully programmed as a core product. And then And that ended up not just being the only product. We developed all kinds of things. In essence, we became like an agency without being an agency. We never just sort of rented out performers. We always conceptualized and worked with people to. You
created packages.
Yeah, we created packages and that were, right for what they were doing. And over time, we also. I think you're a little bit desperate at first just to see how to make things work. But now, for example, I will say to people, no, we don't do that kind of thing. Sorry. If you want something really creative and interesting and inspiring and different, then sure. But if you want, Mrs. Claus reading a book as your Christmas thing, then you're way better off to go to an acting agency and get yourself an actor who might cost you $100 for the day, whereas what it's going to cost you to have a highly trained artist is a lot more. So,
but isn't that great as well that you managed to retain? Because this is one of the things I think that people, when they move into the corporate service sector, a bit of the creativity sometimes can be lost because you have to fulfill a demand. And it seems to some people I chat with, it can be soul crushing at times. Because one of my only corporate gigs I ever did, I wore elf ears outside of Tesco's Express in Slough for 6 hours and did contact you. I thought, never again. Never going to do this again.
I'm not surprised you didn't want to do that again. I don't imagine that filled up your bucket very much.
Well, yeah, I got paid. I got £300 for the day, so I got paid reasonable money. But I just thought it's not worth it.
Yeah,
oh,
exactly.
Yeah. My emotional bucket, my bucket of pride.
No. Exactly. All of those buckets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was important to us. Like our sort of, I suppose our ethos, our thing was really about creating shared joy and memorable experiences of laughter for people. And to be honest, I've loved it. Like, it's been hard work, especially the physical side of dealing with the venues and stuff. But I've really loved it, and I love getting together a group of people that I admire and respect to come and work and do stuff. And then, of course, we also started our own festival here, which will be 10 years next year. So,
and is that the KISS? Is it the KISS festival?
Yeah, the KISS Arts Festival. And so, again, we really wanted it to be the essence of street theatre, but we never wanted to call it just a street theatre festival.
Was there a reason for that?
Yeah, we wanted our community to have a full sense of ownership of what the festival was as well. So we really wanted to have this idea that it was more than, so the street theatre, so the International Street Theatre Acts, as we say, are the main stage event. Like, they're the big deal. But then we still have the tent we have a couple of tents, venues with little smaller stuff in it. And then we have a. Is
that like stand up or curios or things like that?
No, most still variety stuff. A bit of music, a bit of stand up, but mostly varieties. Mostly still our kind of people doing the short shows in tents, and then and it works really well too. Say for things like Shep with the Dr. Hubble's Bubbles, like he can't do that outside, so it's really great to have the venues with.
Unless you get the most perfect conditions that have ever existed.
Yeah, that's right. And again, for things that are a bit more theatrical, it's nice for them to be able to go into those spaces. But we have a community arts tent, the Air Kiss tent, so the artist in residence tent, and we've done some beautiful things through that, including a field of memories, which was done in honor of my mum, where people were able to write on the inside of little pinwheel windmills to give messages to people who are no longer with them, and plant them in a little thing. So we've done like lots of different things with that. We did made 1,000 cranes, like our public made 1,000 cranes that we hung all around. And then we also have a massive.
And 1,000 cranes is a reference to the Japanese lady.
That's right.
And so the bombs hit.
Exactly, and it's those. It's that the 5 elements. I think they talk about, and the cranes represent the 5th element. So it's earth, water, fire, and air, and the 5th element is the people, is the community. To put it simply, it's probably not exactly how it works, but and then we have a massive raft race with all kinds of people get together and make rafts and do this raft race on the harbour, because the whole festival's set around the harbour. So it's it's really great, and the community really owns it and gets involved, and they love the acts, but they also love that they can be personally involved in everything as well. So,
this is something that leads on to my last really big, I think, debate point I wanted to get during this. Is when I talked to you years ago when I was a young entertainer, one of my first few fringes. One of the things you said was that it seemed like you were disappointed that street performing had become just street performing. And so you said, when we began, there used to be actors and they'd do street performance and they'd bring their acting side to it. You'd have dancers and they'd bring that side into it. You'd have this. And it seemed like you felt that the way street performance had evolved was to the detriment of street performance as a whole. Because we had people who weren't bringing in other ideas. They were just churning through the ways to make a show work.
And so this is capitalism, right? That's what that is, isn't it? It's when the heart of something somehow gets lost to the possibility that it's a way, and seemingly maybe sometimes thought of as an easy way, or a way that provides other elements that give it a sense of ease, where when it becomes formulaic, when something becomes so popular that it loses part of its heart, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the things I've talked about a lot with people, and there's a couple of people that who help behind the scenes on the channel, trying to work out the longer, broader themes that are being told in the end. And one of them is the fact that from the 80s to the 90s and to the 2000s to the 2010s, creativity on the street seems to have diminished. We seem to see less people bringing other stuff in.
And I think that there's two sides to that too. That potentially, if we talk about the real street, then there's what's happened there. But I think there's also what's happened even in the festival scene. And I don't necessarily think that creativity has diminished there, but that world was suddenly underfunded, defunded, much more than what it had previously been. And it was also flooded with massive numbers of young circus artists coming out of the sudden huge number of circus schools that existed in the world. And as much as I love and admire young circus artists who learn to do incredible things with their body, I feel that it's also really important that spectacle doesn't overtake connection, or that spectacle can exist on its own. It absolutely can, but it becomes quite one-dimensional and almost minimalized by the lack of other stuff, if there isn't other stuff for it to be in contrast to. And I think that I certainly saw a time where big spectacle that mass numbers of people could watch, when festivals had limited money, they would choose to have that one big thing as opposed to, you know, a huge plethora of tiny experiences, dotted around the place. And I think that also takes away some of the heart of what we do, and of, you know, variety. Variety is really important, right? Variety is really important. So that's part of my objection, is to the lack of variety. And variety is in its essence the creation of creativity, right? The outcome of creativity. Yes. So, you know, I don't want to be a twat about it, but I fucking hate it when there's not enough creative output or imagination or testing.
I'd like you to be a twat
boundaries
about it.
Being pushed.
Because
push a boundary, take a risk, have a go, forge your own path, and yes, as the adage goes, success does leave clues, but it's okay to model, but don't copy. It's okay to.
But this is maybe the thing here as well, and this is why I've slowly changed my tune. Because when I first heard it, I kind of thought, right, whatever, a young person full of it.
What a twat she is.
Yeah, whatever. I'm going to go and do my, 40 minutes of complete hack and think, what the hell are you talking about? And as it's gone on for years, and as I've understood the craft more, and as I've started to introduce more elements of artistry in there, and tried to have messages I've tried to convey, and then looked around to try and see other people doing the same thing, I don't see meat on a lot of the bones. I see a lot of things that are perfectly constructed skeletons, and they hold the weight, and they can move in every way an appendage might choose to move, but there's no meat there. There's not a lot of nourishment as someone in the craft who wants to see artistry and expression.
Yeah,
and that's more on the street side. I don't do a lot of international festivals because I'm a lazy bugger. But in terms of the street side, working in London doing the Fringe, I see a lot of the tourist street shows.
Yeah,
and it's so rare to find someone who's got their own voice out there at the moment.
But that's not just in street theatre. That's in the world too, and I think it comes down to, again, I'm going to use that overused word of that authenticity of, and also that's the reason why that success comes to those who have that, I think, who have that authenticity and
or who can
and
wield
not,
it, maybe.
yeah, not being and just not being like, what we do is all about risk. It's all about putting yourself out there, and ultimately it's all about joy, the giving and receiving of that, right? And so, if this is okay, I'm going to be hard ass. If this to you is just a way to make money, then please stop doing it. That's what I want to say to people. Stop doing it. If you don't have a burning desire and a passion for what this thing is, and the energy exchange that it creates in the world, and understand deeply and inherently the need for laughter and joy, and its very special place in our world, and that's part of the problem right now, is that there's not enough of it around anymore, because we're not able to experience it because it's all freaking shut down. Why is mental health at an all-time high? Well, partly because, people are under a lot of stress and a lot of things are going on and blah, 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 but also because their access to the things that can create joy is vastly diminished. And that includes live theatre. And, so this, again, I'm being a twat, but I take our job extremely seriously. The job to, the job of providing joy and laughter is a very serious job, and it requires creativity, it requires authenticity, it requires vulnerability, and it requires courage. And if you don't have those things and all you see is the money at the end of the thing, then, as I said, stop doing it. Go do something else, because you'll probably make a lot more money elsewhere anyway. So,
And
and these
you'll probably
days,
have a lot less emotional heartache.
yeah, and these days they're, with, the myriad of online things you can do, and evergreen programs and funnels and all that shit, you can probably make money hand over fist, doing a lot less than you have to do to make and create and perform shows for people.
Well, Tamara, we're approaching 2 hours at this point. I just want to say it's been time flies, doesn't it? I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Is there anything we haven't touched upon yet that you'd like to talk about?
No, well, just my darling Kiki Betova bitch. But she was what came after Shirley Sunflower. She's my heart and soul. And I guess
we can go as long as you want. Don't feel there's any rush at all. We can go over 2 hours. It's not a limit. It's just usually it's a nice gauge. So please, you carry on.
I don't want to say very much about her. I just want to acknowledge that, she exists. She's what came after Shirley Sunflower. She was the reinvention of my career, I suppose, in that she was very much about...
Why did that happen? Why did you reinvent yourself? Why did you feel the need to?
Yeah, boredom. I was bored. I was extremely bored with Shirley Sunflower. And I think I'd probably taken that as far as I could, and I just wanted to move on. And after I killed Shirley, she was invited back to do a gig that I couldn't say no to, because it was worth... After my speech, I'm going to say worth a lot of money. but that's exactly why I know that speech is completely true, because I really did not enjoy those 3 weeks, because I shouldn't have been doing her. It was
didn't feel right.
Oh, no, I totally betrayed myself. I completely and utterly betrayed myself. And potentially my audience as well, because it was really unfair. But anyway, you do what you do. I had 2 kids to support.
Take the money.
So, so and Kiki just gave, a broader spectrum to my, she completely broadened my platform, and
Why?
that was fantastic.
Why and how?
Because Shirley Sunflower was created when I was 23 years old, you know, and suddenly I was 35 years old, and nothing was resonating. That clown, you know, that part of me had matured well beyond that, I think. And so
Was this the moment where you get a heavy metal band singing about being in school when they're all 35?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Could be. I'd like that. Have my own soundtrack.
There you go.
But yeah, so I just think, you know, that she's a valid and important part. And then I guess the only other thing that I feel that I really want to say is that
Well, just before we go on to that, I'd like to talk about the Kiki character more. What places can she go to? Where does she go?
well, because she also, the other thing about her is she comes from a completely made up country. And so her stories, her world is infinite, you know, and that's fucking fabulous, by the way. Like, you know, like you can just, you know, she has Kundis, for example, Cazadorian undies, Kiki's Kundis, you know, and the Kundis became the flag of Cazador because, you know, once the country was lost, the only way that people could hold the essence of the country close to themselves was in their underwear, you know, and
You can create a mythos there. You've got a mythos building up.
Endless, and the stories that have come out of, you know, what Kundis are, and the way that people have embraced Kundis, you know, it's just the fact that
Merchandise.
yeah, I know, I've thought about it many times, but I've never done it. But and she's very kind but very blunt. So again, she has the same duality that Shirley had, but in a much vaster, more mature sense.
Is it more of a caring matriarch rather than
exactly? She doesn't play on the sexual, you know, that sort of naive sexuality isn't. It's not there. It's not part of who she is. You know, not that she doesn't embrace sexuality. She very much does, but
it's just
but
it doesn't have to be overt in the same way.
Yeah, it's very different.
It's understated.
Yeah, and she still has that real play with the audience and volunteers and men and stuff, but again in a different way. Nothing's about love. She's not looking for love. She doesn't have those kind of naive principles. She's very worldly.
But looking for love is not naive. Okay, I would say at least. But I'd say this, okay? How interesting the parallels of your characters in your life, when what you need when you're young is love and to be desired. And what you need as a 35-year-old woman, I'd imagine, is you don't need love because you have Dave, you love him. You don't have to search for these things anymore. So the character creation now becomes about what you do need and what that character needs, what you need in a way. How interesting.
It is. And I think that, you know, I was ready to have a voice, and that's the different thing too, right? And Kiki has a voice, like she has opinions, you know, and that's a beautiful thing. And because she comes from a place that's completely made up, her opinions it's fabulous scope, like the scope of creativity and her ability to justify her opinions is just beautiful.
And does she always play virtuous? Do you make her a monster, so to speak, sometimes, as you could do
yes.
in imaginary country?
Oh yes, yeah. Well, she's certainly had her trials and tribulations. You know, I do a gag about, you know, being in a shipping container, you know, when on her way to America, that she was human trafficked, you know, and that she was a refugee, and there are different things that you know, so she very much it's just worldly wise, really. Not and she can be quite a bitch. I mean, Kiki Petovovich, you know, she certainly can be quite a bitch. And that's okay too. Yeah. Petovovich. But yeah, so here's what I think is really, and I love her, by the way. I love her. Oh, sorry. I I love her. She's a brilliant tool for expression, definitely. And what I love about her too is she's very compassionate. I like her compassion, even though she's a total hard ass with this full-on background. She's got a lot of compassion, and that's very
I
nice.
suppose you kind of have to build a character you love to play them all the time.
It helps, I reckon.
Yeah.
But I think that the only thing that I really wanted to say is that it's a very interesting and challenging time to be disconnected from the thing that you've done for 25 years of your life, the thing that's like a drug to you, really. You know, this this exchange of energy, this release of energy, this expression of your identity, and to not have that in your life for a period of time is very discombobulating, I think, and I'm sure lots of people feel like that. And in the history of street theatre, even going back all the days to Commedia, I seriously doubt there was ever a time with mass non-performance, mass non-expression of creativity in live discourse. So
well, maybe at the most you got Spanish flu, Black Plague, first Black
true,
Plague, and that's what
true.
we're looking at 3 times in 1,000 years.
Yeah.
You know,
And we are living through one of those times, you know, and us in
extraordinary
our
times.
us in our blessed times, you know, where we think nothing can touch us. But I think what's really beautiful about this time is the notion of the of what else is within you, I think, like, you know, and how else you can express your art. And I was so reticent to compromise. We compromised very early on in a virtual sense because we ran our festival virtually, and we started doing Kiki and Pascal's comedy online pub quizzes when everyone was locked down in Australia, and that was fine. But I tell you, the joy was not the same.
No,
And so I went, well, I'm unwilling to compromise, because the exchange of energy was very different. Although I think the audience felt very served, if I can
yeah.
come back to
100%. Well,
that.
I think the audience was served because what you did, hopefully what I did, what a number of other people did at the time, was we were all kind of a bit lost, and we needed that semblance of community and that semblance of connection with people who we aren't able to see now. And you supplied that, and a lot of people stepped up at that time to
And
make sure.
that, yes.
Yeah. One of the interesting things you say about this is that we're doing street shows in London now.
Oh, are you?
Covent Garden is open, we are. But because of social distancing, because of the awareness of people not to be close to each other, and because of the diminished footfall, the shows cannot work the way they did then. They have to be rewritten completely. And it's that thing that you're saying, I'm feeling that right now, this kind of belligerence of, no, I will bang my head against this wall with the show I did before until it works.
Yeah, that's right.
Which, of course, you know, is stubborn and not true. We've got to evolve. We have to, you know.
And we do, and you know, and because I'm so unwilling to compromise in my live sense, and that may change with time as well, but it's been interesting to challenge myself to find something that would be acceptable for me to have a creative outlet, and that's, you know, and I come to that because of Kiki and because of her beautiful breadth of possibility. I now finally go, oh, I know what I can do. There's finally become a thing that I can do, and I finally found something that I feel connected to that I could do. But I don't think
it's going to be a YouTube channel, or
I am going to do a YouTube channel.
There you go. You heard it here first.
But I always knew it was a possibility, but I just didn't. I wanted to wait till I found the thing that I felt wholly connected to do it. Like, but it's not a monetize. Like, well, certainly in a short time, there's no monetizing of that. Like, unless it presents further possibilities. But I think, again, it comes back to that service, right? Serve an audience, but also serve myself by having that creative outlet. So,
Okay,
but yeah,
well,
it's not the same. But we'll see. Who
it's
knows
not
what
the
it will
same.
bring?
Very much so. And I will say this, the worst pandemic of the last 100 years, the 1918 pandemic, did last 4 years. So maybe
Yes.
we've got a long slog. But when I led my life, we didn't lead lives of quarantine. We hugged, kissed, and embraced each other freely. We will get back to that again one day.
We will, and let us all just hold on to how incredibly precious it is, and not forget how to do it. Because
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
you
And
know,
thank you so much for sharing your story. I think that's part of the ability for us to hold on. When I learned, I went to performers.net and I read all of the conversations on performers.net, which really gave me an idea of what it is to do a show, how you think about shows, the psychology of crowds, all these kind of stuff that we, have kind of in this conversation battered a little bit by saying that it becomes the enemy of creativity, but nonetheless it helped a lot. And I hope that these interviews will have the same thing for people. They can sit and they can look at the lives of interesting, amazing people and how they developed. And your story has been incredibly fascinating, really interesting, Tamara. Thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me. It's been lovely to talk to you, Matt. And I think that you're doing a great thing, and I like the way you do it too. Well done.
Oh, thank you very much.
Good work.
So I think that's the end. I'm going to say goodbye, everyone. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like it, share it. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on Facebook, please follow. Join the Whining On Public Performers group. For now, from me and from Tamara, I say goodbye. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.